nice. They didn't mess up any of your insurances, did they?
No.
Did you have life and
No,
stuff?
because I didn't, oh, they won't give me life insurance anymore because I'm too old.
You had it, I thought.
I did have it at one time. I make a motion for the chicken dance.
There you go.
I've got it on my phone if you.
What happened at city council tonight?
We all stood up and did the chicken dance. That's really sad.
Yeah, we got thumbs up.
I'll try to find it.
All right, welcome back. I don't know if, we don't need a motion to go back into session, I guess. I don't think so. Okay. All right. I'm not even sure where we were.
We're getting ready
Oh,
for written.
okay. We are going back to written communications.
A letter from Catherine Hunt Thomas with the Ability Center on a legal opinion of carriage walks.
Questions or comments? Mr. Palmer.
I'd like to refer this letter to the Streets, Sidewalk, and Parking Committee.
Second, Mr. Slough. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Yep, it will be referred.
Sorry, just making some notes. An email from Emily Birchfield regarding the 119 West McPherson Avenue rezone.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A email and letter from Catherine Ziegler regarding the feral chicken loose in the 600 block of Fishlock Avenue.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
An email from the Coovers regarding former Fifth Third property and McPherson zoning change request.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed. Reports of municipal officers and departments.
Officer shareholders disclosure form from the Ohio Department of Commerce, Division of Liquor Control for Curious Enterprises LLC, doing business as Bricks by Bistro and Patio, located at 411 South Main Street in Findlay for a D1, D2, D3, and D6 liquor permit. A check of the records show no current criminal record for those who applied.
Mr. Slab.
I would move no objection be filed.
Second, Ms. Frishy. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor that no objection be filed, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. No objection will be filed.
Letter from Mayor Mern regarding annual bids and contracts.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from Mayor Mern regarding an appointment to the Hancock Metropolitan Housing Authority Board.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from Assistant City Engineer Roush regarding the Strict Center Amendment Number 1 for the guaranteed maximum price proposal.
Questions or comments? Mr. Greeno.
Yeah, Jeremy, could I get a little clarification on why we have two different ones here, or what these are actually for, please? Thank you.
Yep, so they've been working on the Strict Center, as everyone knows. It went through design build process. We finally kind of got the design around with the site plans and all that kind of stuff, and knowing what the building size is, what it's going to look like, and all that kind of stuff. We're actually getting into the time where it's going to be getting very difficult to move dirt or do any kind of compaction with dirt. It's a very temperature dependent type operation. So we decided to split that up into a GMP1, which would just be pretty much the site work. What that will allow us to do is do the site work now, get the work done, and then we can have the work ready that the building can be constructed when it is snowing, when it's cold out. So we're kind of playing that temperature gradient time. But we split that out so that way it can go through first. We can get the building or we can get the whole site moving, and we can be working when it's cold. If we lose this opportunity of not being able to get compaction or anything moving dirt because of the temperatures, then work probably won't start until spring, which just pushes the whole schedule back. They've been working on the schedule. This will keep everyone on schedule, be able to build that building during the cold months. So we decided to split that out, and that GMP2 will actually be the steel building itself and the erection of it. So the GMP 1 will be the site work to get us ready for GMP 2. Like I said, just split that out so that way we can move it all along and we're not all just sending one GMP all at the same time. That, that should, see the 3 readings and stuff, but this one we want to blast and we keep moving.
Any other questions or comments? Letter to be filed?
Roush regarding the Strict Center GMP 2, amendment number 2.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed?
A letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding Parker Training Room Restroom Remodel, project number 319-12000.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed?
A letter from Law Director Rasmussen regarding Bricker and Eckler LLP invoices for the Strict Center Water Service Extension.
Questions or comments? Letter to be, Mr. Hellman.
Yeah, I've got a quick question. I noticed in here, and Don, this is probably for you, that we're getting invoices clear back into May. Do they not bill us as they go along?
They do, it's not always timely.
I've noticed. Okay. All right.
Any other questions or comments? Letter to be filed?
Letter from Mayor Mern regarding ornaments for the City of Findlay Christmas tree.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed?
Letter from, I think I skipped something, Service Safety Director Martin and Mayor Mern regarding ARPA funds. I guess it isn't from, it's just Mayor Mern.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed?
Letter from Hancock Regional Planning Commission Director Cordania regarding the 6-month moratorium.
Questions or comments? Mr. Wobser.
Matt, you're asking for a pretty significant change here, and I think it's interesting. There's a good article on the front page of the paper today with this. Could you give us a little more detail behind this and what your thoughts are and kind of your schedule going forward?
Sure. So I've submitted 2 letters to City Council, 2 requests. The first is a zoning amendment, which would put restrictions on small box retail stores, which are dollar stores, thrift stores, etc. And it would also put restrictions on games of skill businesses. If you're not familiar with games of skill businesses, they present themselves as gambling establishments. You play at a video console, and it has all the feeling of gambling, and you win gift cards, vouchers, gas cards, etc. It's called games of skill because each game has been determined by the state of Ohio to have one aspect that requires skill. So we've requested a zoning amendment to put limitations on both those business types. We've been receiving a lot of interest and phone calls about establishing more small box retail stores and more games of skill businesses. I was concerned that too many would have a negative effect on the city of Findlay. I looked at other communities because I've been to communities and they have no games of skill parlors in their community. So I wanted to see what other communities were doing. What most communities do is allow them, like in the I-1 district, or they put a cap on the number of parlors that can be open per, like 1 for 10,000, which I'm proposing. There could be 1 game of skill for every 10,000 people in the city of Findlay, and it'd have to be located in I-1. So looking at what other communities have done, I'm proposing this amendment to City Council. It will go through its normal process. It will go to Planning Commission, Planning and Zoning, and then it'll come back to City Council for its readings. That leads me to the second request, which is a 6-month moratorium. My concern is, upon the announcement that we're working on an update on adding restrictions to dollar stores and games of skill, that there may be parties that, rush to Findlay to establish themselves before those rules can take effect. What I'm proposing for the moratorium is for Planning Commission to consider it on October 13th, provide a recommendation, the Planning and Zoning Commission, or Planning and Zoning Committee, to also hear it on October 13th. Then it would come back to City Council on October 18th. At that time, if things are on track, then I'd request that at the October 18th meeting, you waive the final readings and pass it on an emergency basis. So that's kind of the process that I was envisioning. The reason that I'd request it to waive the 3 readings is because if we don't, it will almost finish up as the same time as the zoning amendments if there are no amendments or hang-ups. So that's what I'm proposing. Are there any further questions?
Mr. Baumann?
So you mentioned per capita for the skill gaming facilities. What about the dollar store? What do other communities do, and how many dollar stores do we have in town?
We currently have $8 stores in the city of Findlay, and then there's one just outside the city of Findlay. Other communities also have put a ratio. The most common I found is 1 for every 10,000 people. And then also adding a clause that you can't put another dollar store within a mile of an existing dollar store. This change of the code would not affect the existing dollar stores. They could continue to operate. And then on the games of skill, we currently have 6. The games of skill are very transient. They come and go. They'll move into a strip mall for 3 months and they'll disappear, and then another one pops in. So they're a moving target. They're very transient and short-termed.
Ms. Frischie?
Just give me like an idea. I-1 areas in town, like what is that area?
Light industrial,
But like, give,
the north side of town. Let's see, Tall Timbers.
oh, that's what my head went to. So Tall Timbers
So,
or
I mean,
north of,
to be honest, so for example, adult businesses, they are permitted in the city of Findlay, but you make it, to discourage them, you allow them in places where they probably wouldn't want to go. There aren't strip malls in the I-1 district. And so essentially, if a game of skill wanted to locate, they most likely would have to build something. And that would have, it's a conditional use. It would be reviewed by Planning Commission and could be fully vetted out. The nature of what I've seen of these businesses is they're here for less than a year and then they go away. And then another one pops up somewhere else. It's kind of like whack-a-mole a little bit. So honestly, I think by having it in the I-1 district, it will discourage short-term operators.
Mr. Wobser?
Matt, is there any concern about labeling the restriction as on dollar/thrift stores? I mean, you say it's small box retail, and the idea being, Dollar General and places of that ilk. What about the gift card shop that happens to be in the same size, or something that's not a thrift store? Can we narrow it down to, do they have to tell us what it's going to be?
And that's where I think the definition, part of the definition is the size, but then there's a statement that they frequently advertise prices less than $10. So other communities have worked on a definition, and I'm borrowing that definition that I think hones in on our target audience, our target businesses.
And as far as you know, there's not been any issues with legal liability or legal challenges to that type of a definition?
I don't know that answer.
I think it makes sense what we're trying to do here on both accounts, and certainly support it. But at the same time, I'm trying to figure out how we narrow the focus on just that type of business. As long as we can do it legally, I'm all for it. But, so the plan is you want us to pass a 6-month moratorium that gives you 6 months to get everything put together as far as actual changes to the zoning code.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Matt. Letter to be filed.
Thank you.
Letter from Hancock Regional Planning Commission Director Cordania regarding amendments to the Findlay zoning code, dollar thrift stores, skilled-based gaming.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
City Planning Commission agenda for October 13th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Mr. Wobser?
Make a motion to approve the committee report?
That was just the agenda.
Oh,
It was the add-on.
No problem. Any other questions or comments? Agenda to be filed. Committee reports.
The Strategic Planning Committee met on September 13th, 2022 to discuss the initial draft plan. We recommend that the mayor and committee chair move forward with the formatting of a survey to solicit feedback from the Findlay business community. The goal is to gather information for the economic development portion of the strategic plan and to include a commitment to the 1% income tax with appropriate caveats in the strategic plan.
Mr. Wobser?
I repeat my motion.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the Strategic Plan Committee report, say aye. Any opposed, nay. The committee report is adopted.
The Appropriations Committee, to whom was referred a request to discuss the use of ARPA funds. We recommend that the mayor move forward with the use of ARPA funds as listed in the attached document.
Mr. Wobser?
Make a motion to approve the committee report.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the Appropriation Committee report, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. It is adopted.
The Strategic Planning Committee met on September 20th, 2022 to review public input data. We recommend continuing the strategic planning process. Also record the votes on the draft plan. See attached document.
Mr. Wobser?
One more motion to approve another committee report.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of adopting the committee report, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. It is adopted.
The Committee of the Whole meeting was held on Tuesday, September 27th, 2022 to discuss the city's mid-year review. The city's financial position year-to-date and future budget subjects were discussed and a slideshow was presented by City Auditor Stashak.
Mr. Palmer?
Move to accept the Committee of the Whole report.
Second, Mr. Hellman. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the Committee of the Whole report, say aye. Any opposed, nay. It is adopted.
The Committee of the Whole meeting was held on Monday, September 27th, 2022 to conduct a pre-budget meeting. Future budget subjects were discussed and a slideshow was presented by City Auditor Stashak.
Mr. Wobser?
Make a motion to approve.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the Committee of the Whole report, say aye. Any opposed, nay. It is adopted. Legislation. Resolutions.
First reading for Resolution 28, 2022. A resolution approving the expenditures made by the Auditor's Office on the attached list of vouchers which either exceed the purchase order or were incurred without a purchase order, exceeding the statutory limit of $3,000, all in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 5705.41D.
Mr. Greeno?
Move for adoption of resolution number 028-2022.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the resolution, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Slough? Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
And Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. Ordinances.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-87, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into a contract or contracts for the West Lincoln Street Storm Sewer Project number 355-21700, appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Greeno?
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2022-087.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer. Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-91, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Slough.
I move for adoption of ordinance 2022-091.
Second, Mr. Hellman. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer. Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-94. An ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director of the City of Findlay, Ohio to waive formal advertising and bidding requirements and enter into a contract or contracts with Caris LLC for the purchase of liquid sodium permanganate needed by the City of Findlay, Ohio for calendar year 2023 and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Baumann.
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2022-094.
Second, Mr. Hellman. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer. Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2022-97, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to enter into a real estate purchase agreement with Remington Arms for the purchase of properties located on Bank Street and East Hobart Street and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2022-98, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2022-100, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director of the City of Findlay, Ohio to waive the formal advertising and bidding requirements and enter into a contract or contracts with Lindy Incorporated for the purchase of liquid carbon dioxide needed by the City of Findlay, Ohio for calendar year 2023 and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Greeno.
I move that the statutory rules of council be waived and this ordinance be given its third reading.
Second, Mr. Baumann. All those in favor of waiving the rules say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer. Aye. Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its third reading.
Ordinance 2022-100.
Mr. Slough.
I move for adoption of ordinance 2022-100.
Second, Mr. Wobser. Discussion. Mr. Hellman.
Is there a reason for expediting this? Whoever-
Mr. Wobser, can you
Well,
answer that?
I'll go back to what I remember from our conversation with the safety service director was that we were going to let this go for the second week, but we do need to get this done and in place. And Rob, I just remember we made an agreement when we talked about this first time around, we'd let it go to the second meeting, go 2 readings. Am I correct, Rob? And he's nodding his head for the record, yes.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
And Mr. Niemeyer.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022, 101. An ordinance authorizing the mayor and/or service safety director of the city of Findlay, Ohio to advertise for bids and enter into contracts with option years for the purchase of materials, chemicals, and service agreements needed by various departments of the city of Findlay, Ohio, commencing January 1st, 2023, and declaring an emergency.
Sorry, Mr. Greeno.
Yeah, Jeremy, is this something that we need to get through tonight because of timing for chemicals and stuff for the different departments?
Yeah, since this is just giving us, I guess, permission to go into bid and enter into contracts with those, with budgets coming up and kind of the timing with that we got to have that out for a total of 3 weeks. you'll get past those budgets and stuff. So it would be preferred if we can get that passed tonight, so that way we can send these services and chemicals out to bid.
Mr. Greeno.
Then, with that being said, like the statutory rules of council to be waived and this given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Niemeyer. All those in favor of waiving the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? And Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-101, ordinance 2022-101.
Mr. Greeno.
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2022-101.
Second, Mr. Wobser. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Greeno, oh my, Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
And Mr. Slough?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
I was looking at him. First reading for ordinance 2022-102, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into a guaranteed maximum price phase amendment number 1, GMP 1, with Klaus Construction Corporation for the site design and preparation work for the Strict Center project and declaring an emergency.
Ms. Warnicki.
I'd like to make a motion that we suspend the rules on this based on what Jeremy said before and give it its second and third readings tonight.
Second, Mr. Ballman. All those in favor of suspending the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Wobser?
Nay.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
And Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-102, ordinance 2022-102.
Ms. Warnicki.
I would move for approval of ordinance number 2022-102.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion. Ms. Frishy.
I just had a question on the schedule of it. Where are we at it? Like, when is the project supposed to be done? I wasn't here in the beginning of the start of it, so. I know we've been working on it for a while, so when are we supposed to be up and running?
Yep, so, since we're kind of going through with this, if the current schedule we're staying on, it'll probably be late spring, early summer, kind of like, of 23 that we're looking at right now, because this will give us opportunity to build through the winter.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
And Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-103, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into a guaranteed maximum price phase amendment number 2, GMP 2, with Klaus Construction Corporation for the procurement and erection of the building for the Strict Center project, appropriating funds thereto, and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2022-104, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2022-105, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2022-106, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2022-107, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into a grant agreement with the Findlay Hancock County Community Foundation in order to receive funds to purchase Christmas tree ornaments and decorating supplies to be placed on the City of Findlay Christmas tree, appropriating funds thereto, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Baumann.
Given the fact that this is us accepting grant dollars and the reasons the mayor outlined in her letter, I would move that we forgo the statutory rules of council and give this its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Wobser. All those in favor of suspending the rules, say aye after name. Aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-107, ordinance 2022-107.
Mr. Baumann?
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2022-107.
Second, Mr. Hellman. Discussion? Mr. Wobser?
Mayor, can we still get these Christmas decorations for this year's celebration?
Yes, that is the plan. Thank you for expediting this. We are ready, set, go to order these tomorrow. If you guys approved this, so just for those who may not have had the opportunity, or the public, I had the idea earlier this year to continue to kind of build on our Christmas tree tradition and be able to order 6-inch white matte Christmas ornaments that we will then have an event in collaboration with the Community Foundation and CVB, most likely at the Performing Arts Center, but working through those details where families and individuals can come and decorate their own Christmas ornament to put on the city Christmas tree. With that, the Community Foundation is covering the expense of the white ornaments along with some Sharpies for people to use to decorate them, and then the city will be purchasing additional decorations, globes that are large, and additionally we are working with some students to potentially create some additional decorations for the tree. So excited to I know we're still far away, but with supply chain, as we all know, it could take a long time, so we should be good to go and get these in time to have that community event.
Mr. Hellman?
Mayor, how many ornaments are you ordering?
I think we're ordering 300, if I remember correctly off the top of my head.
And is there an age limit?
No. Everybody is welcome. We would love to see you. You know what? I told him I might like need somebody to trace something out for me, and then I can color it in. I am not the most artistic. I'll probably ask my mom to help me out, but we all have our own skills, right? We'd love to have you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
And Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
The ornaments are adopted. I mean, the ordinance.
First reading for ordinance 2022-108, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency. Nope. First reading for ordinance 2022-109, an ordinance authorizing the establishment of a 6-month moratorium on the establishment of any new small box retail stores and skill-based amusement businesses in order for the city of Findlay, Ohio to consider incorporating the proposed additions into the current zoning code as outlined below before enacting them as part of the codified ordinances of the city of Findlay, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Wobser?
I have to admit that I'm a little conflicted on passing this on suspended rules tonight without any opportunity for public comment whatsoever. I understand the reason, Matt. Totally understand. We want to head off anybody rushing to judgment. I don't know. I'd like to hear some other council members' thoughts on this topic.
Ms. Warnicki?
Well, I can see the point of doing that, and I guess if anybody was totally offended by that and made their decisions known after 6 months, this would be over, for one thing. And two, I did think it was interesting in the paper today, because I didn't see that in the other stuff that I had read, that it looks like there's a history of that possibly taking out a grocery store that has more nutritious food, I think was the way that worded it, instead of cheap packaged stuff that, anyway, I would be for it.
Mr. Palmer?
I think the owners and those in the industries that are being that are under this proposed moratorium should have the opportunity to speak to us and make their argument as to why we should not do that.
Ms. Frishy?
Mayor, can you give us a little bit of history? I know at least on these, what I would call gambling things, they haven't had the best track record in our community. Can can you give some push for us to do this?
Well, when Matt approached me with this concern, I am supportive of it. I think, first of all, 6 months when you're looking to establish a business, you probably have already been in contact with the city and began the process. So I don't think we're really going to be limiting someone in the near future that would be interested in beginning, to establish a facility like this, especially the box stores. The skills games, as Matt has mentioned, they are typically places that pop up, have some issues with law enforcement, and then are gone again. Obviously, we're familiar with one, at least on Sandusky Street, that has had a number of problems and is no longer located there. I know we've had some other facilities over by kind of Menards, over by Rancho Fiesta. So they are typically places that our law enforcement are well aware of and deal with frequently. However, I know that there's also a population that is interested in them. So I think that because it is something that we already have in our community and we're not necessarily negatively impacting individuals to be able to access them, we're just giving ourselves opportunity to determine if it's really what we want in our community moving forward. So I am supportive of the moratorium and the further discussing the language change.
Mr. Baumann.
I mean, to me, this just makes sense. I mean, if I heard Matt correctly, we have 4 more dollar stores than what our population would allow. And as someone who's been on a ride along with our great police department, these skill gaming sites are hard for our officers to lay eyes on what's actually occurring inside these places. It's difficult for them to, say, do a walkthrough of the business and hard telling, what other kind of nefarious activities are going on inside, and our cops can't get an eye on it.
Mr. Hellman?
I mean, I can't address that issue, but I do have a question for Matt. If we were to pass this, and there would be 6 weeks? Are we talking about 6 weeks or 6 month moratorium? When this is being heard, then for final legislation, those who have an interest could get up and speak at that point in time, correct? And the legislation could be modified?
I didn't have Bertie was in my ear, so I didn't hear everything he said.
The question was, this moratorium for, is it 6 months?
Correct.
6 weeks, 6 months, that's what I thought. Once that comes off and we hear the legislation officially, would not the proprietors of these have the ability to come in and talk about it then?
So we're moving forward with the proposed changes are moving forward now.
All right.
So, so when I got up and spoke, I view there's 2 options that are reasonable. One is passing it tonight, but I know that's a little abrupt. And what I had proposed was letting Planning Commission weigh in on it a week from this Thursday, and Planning and Zoning weigh in on it, and then on the 18th, the next meeting, it satisfies that there's a little period of time passed, and then I would request at that meeting to waive the readings.
Heard.
And
Just
I'm comfortable with both, but I know
for
some people.
clarification, you're talking about the 6-month moratorium, not
Correct.
the actual ordinance.
The actual zoning amendment will go through its normal 3 readings and all that process. But they're both moving forward at the same time. So it won't be the moratorium and then moving forward with the amendment. Both started tonight, the legislation.
I don't mind the moratorium, but I guess, as was mentioned earlier, I think maybe we ought to give those who operate these types of things an opportunity to speak their mind.
On the zoning amendment?
Yeah.
Yes, and that's the zoning amendment. I personally would never request a zoning amendment, a permanent change to the code to be expedited. We need the public to weigh in, and that's the process. It'll be going through the regular process.
Okay, Ms. Frischi?
So, stay put, Matt. So, I have I guess I'm easier on board with regards to the skill-based businesses to do something immediately, where I think the small box retailers, I think we need to give more consideration and hear them. And then, and I guess how do you feel about that? I mean, why do you have them together? Could we have put these separate? So you have the small box definition, and then you have the skilled gaming thing. Can we separate, or it has to be together?
I presented it together. I don't know the logistics of separating it right now.
Well, I just meant for you, like, it would be under the same definition when you're done, when we take it through committee and we make the changes, it'll be one, because you had the definitions together. I'm trying to understand why they're together. Just because that's what you did, or because they categorize together?
So for each category, we're adding a definition to the zoning code. So I tried to show the proposed changes, and then one of the changes is adding the definition of each. The moratorium,
I'm looking at the moratorium is what I'm more
Okay.
focused on.
So-
I'm looking at, to do something immediate, I agree that, like, we need to give these small box businesses more time to weigh in, and have that discussion, because I don't think it's right to jump on it. Plus, I love my Dollar Tree, and I hope it reopens on Tiffin Avenue, but that's okay. But the amusement gambling situation, I see that as an issue in our community that brings things that our community does not want. So I would be in favor of passing that part tonight for the skilled amusement, remove the small box. But then the other option I thought about, which might be a Don question, on section 3, the ordinance, section 2 of making it passed immediately. Since it hasn't gone to planning and zoning and planning commission yet until the 13th, can we make it have a special date and not 30 days?
I can speak to that. You can, as council, you can propose anything you want. And it can be passed by council, whether it's a legal issue that would.
We don't need any
but
more legal
per
issues.
Robert's Rules of Order, you can change anything, you can add anything, you can stop anything, and you can move forward anything, as long as there's the majority that's required.
So just, I guess, a point of clarification, I'm not viewing the moratorium as a change to the zoning code.
No, but it's putting everything on hold, right?
Correct.
So putting people on hold for the next 6 months without vetting it on small box, especially when we're trying to determine a Hallmark store versus a dollar store, I think that needs more vetting. And I guess that's, I'm looking for council to give me some input on the thought process compared to taking care of the 6 months immediately right now. Okay, go for it.
No, he's not next.
Oh.
Ms. Warnicki, you had your hand up first. Did you still have a comment?
Yeah. I thought from what I read, I guess I don't understand why, well, anyway. I thought you said this isn't having any impact on what's here, correct? You just don't want to let anything new come in the next 6 months, right?
Correct.
So I guess I don't really understand who needs to give a lot of comments to this, but that's where I was confused. I mean, the people that are here, I don't think needed a comment, but.
Mr. Baumann?
Yeah, I mean, for me, same. They'll already get that input with the second ordinance. So in other words, there's really no need to separate it or do anything. It's a point in time so we can begin the discussion, and that's it.
Mr. Wobser?
I appreciate council's input on that. I think what I would potentially suggest, because you're right, we've got separation with the actual legislation, but you started legislation tonight, right? So this is reading 1, and so it'll be passed in the first meeting of November, correct? All things being equal, if it passes. I'm still concerned about time for public input. To me, this is a significant change when we're limiting businesses, and I think we should give time. What I would suggest that we do is that council go ahead and approve the moratorium for 6 months tonight for both. And then when we get the legislation come through, that we delay that and potentially give it a couple more, another meeting or so, just to give it a little bit more time. Since we have 6 months, right, to get it passed, Matt?
Correct.
Thank you. And then, so I would, I think maybe a better way would have done, let's say we'll put the moratorium on now and then brought the legislation to us at the first of the year. But since it's already here, that's the way I would probably go with it, which means tonight we suspend and go, and then we'll deal with the actual legislation when it comes to us, when it finally gets passed with the 2 committees, if it does. I am not making a motion to suspend.
Mayor?
And I would just add, I think it kind of goes back to Councilman Hellman's question at the beginning. If as we work through the process, it's determined we don't want to move forward with the change, you can repeal the moratorium prior to the 6-month period as well.
Mr. Niemeyer?
I think it's too much government. Seems like somebody doesn't like dollar stores in Findlay. Are we gonna do this to hamburger shops? Are we gonna do this to the tobacco sales? Are we gonna do this to look at the people that sell cigarettes? They're within a mile of each other. I think if you have a product ID or service, you ought to use the free enterprise system and be able to open a business.
Any other questions or comments?
There's no motion.
Letter to be filed. Or, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, not letter, I'm sorry. There's no motion to suspend, so. Okay, next. Oh, sorry. Mr. Baumann?
I would make the motion to suspend the rules and the ordinance number 2022-109 be given its second and third readings.
Second, Ms. Warnicki. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Nay.
Mr. Palmer?
Nay.
Mr. Slough?
Nay.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wopser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Nay.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
The motion to suspend is not adopted.
5.
Okay,
Against.
next.
First reading for ordinance 2022-110, an ordinance repealing sections 135.03, 1137.071, and 1143.03, and 1174 of the current zoning code, and in its place enacting the same amended sections of the codified ordinances of the city of Findlay, Ohio.
Old business. New business. Ms. Mayor.
Just a couple of quick items. First of all, thank you for passing the Christmas ornaments. We'll share more information as that event comes together. My apologies for the delay in the meeting. Thank you for your flexibility, and thank goodness for a great IT team who was able to step in and help us get up and running. Just wanted to give you a quick update on the couple of items that we discussed at the ARPA meeting that we were going to continue to do research on. We had a good meeting with Ginger Sampson from the auditor's office today. So we are working through some proposals on some additional programs, and then we'll probably in the next week or two request a meeting to come back to you all with some plans there. I know we are continuing to have a little bit of issues with the water, but definitely clearing up. And fortunately, we're in better shape than a lot of other communities. That quick temperature change obviously caused some issues with the water turnover at the reservoir, but our team adapted quickly, and we should really clear up completely in the next couple of days. And I want to say thank you to them for adapting and getting in additional carbon as we saw some other communities. Jason continues to educate me on these things. A lot of carbon comes out of Florida, and obviously Florida was hit really hard with a hurricane, so we're fortunate that we were able to adapt and get additional supply to be able to continue to treat our water appropriately. I believe those are all the items that I wanted to touch on. Any questions for me? Awesome. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
Ms. Frishy.
I guess this would have been old business. We have had some meetings on carriage walks. I continue to get a lot of phone calls and emails on that, and it's since we have our law director and engineer here today, and we had a document submitted for a legal opinion. I'd just like to know if you've gotten a definition, Don, as far as to define carriage walks for us so that they're not a sidewalk, and if you have anything additional, Jeremy, that you've done other than submitting that legal opinion.
So I can touch on it while Jeremy's coming up. You can come up. So we did reach out to 2 different firms. You saw the Ability Center. We did reach out to another firm as well, and we've been in contact with Councilman Palmer, who's the chair. So now that we have that information, we'll be going back to the street sidewalks and parking committee to be able to discuss those further and determine what recommendation that committee would like to make to council.
So you have an additional study that wasn't in the packet tonight?
I believe we had one other legal opinion that wasn't.
Did you get that, Josh?
We haven't sent that one yet out. We were going to take it back to the committee because that's what had been originally discussed. Yeah, since it was tabled, so it's just another opinion providing, and then we're going to have a couple of options on how we can proceed.
Sorry. Yeah, we just don't want, since that's a table subject in a committee right now, don't want to get too much cross, conversation going on. I have no problem having the conversation. I'd like to have it at the committee, so that way it's vetted through there, and then once it's going through there, then we can come here and have that conversation. But since it's an open subject, we'll have all that information for you guys, if Mr. Palmer is wanting to call a meeting for that.
Yeah, the only reason I brought it up is because we had a legal opinion in the council packet that probably should have gone to committee and not the council packet.
Correct.
But Don, do you have any updates? Do you have your information together on defining?
His back is hurt really bad. I'd rather not have him have to get up if he can yell it.
I've got the one opinion and opinion that I'm working on so far. So, looking for some more information before we do anything. But I agree that going to the committee where it started from would be the easiest, I think, and the best. And work with a group and then take it to council.
Mr. Palmer?
Hey, Don, do you have any time frame for when you expect to have that opinion ready?
Probably within the next week or two, we could do.
All right.
Do you have a
That would be
meeting
that would be
scheduled
my opinion.
in the future there?
I don't have one. I was waiting on
Okay.
the rest of the information to be ready. 2 weeks from now, is that good for you, Holly?
It's not about me, it's about the property owners, and we're getting into fall and needing their carriage walks to get to their front yard, and originally we were talking 2 weeks to get this
Right.
information, so I just wanted to give the public a little input, and if we can set a date on something, I think that'd be good.
Well, I want to have all the information available that we can have, so we don't have multiple meetings. We can get this knocked out in one, hopefully. I'm good all through the 17th through the 21st, so. If any of those days work for whoever's on, let's see here. Jim, you're on the committee as well. Any, that week work well for you?
Yes.
Holly?
What day you, what day?
17th through the 21st, any one of those days.
And you're talking 4 o'clock, or are you talking 5? What are you talking?
Whatever works, 4 or 5, either one. I can do either one of those times. It doesn't matter to me. Just want to make sure we can have all the committee members there.
If we could do it before the council meeting on Tuesday, the 18th. Is council the 18th? I can't.
Yes.
Yep, maybe that might work. I don't know. Other than that,
5 o'clock on the 18th?
that or the 19th.
Jim, 5 o'clock on the 18th?
Sure.
All right. There we go.
Thank you, Josh.
Any other new business? Oh, Mr. Stashek.
Real quick, I want to thank everybody who attended the pre-budget meeting and mid-year review. I always appreciate the opportunity to share that with you, and I know the folks who evaluate us for where we're at financially appreciate that we do that as well, and for the members who checked with me that were unable to attend, I appreciate the opportunity to share that information. There was one I wanted to follow up in order for me to determine for sure the resources, the money available for our departments going into 2023. There was some discussion and a suggestion that I had made that you consider taking your unspent, already appropriated monies and put them towards reserving restrictions, some reserves for whether it be water, sewer, or things that the general fund might touch. We were talking about between three, quite a bit of money, and I just wanted to follow up because if you're willing or interested in having that discussion, if we could have that before the end of the month, it would be timely for me in moving forward with my budget process and doing the revenue and the resources that I have to do.
Mr. Hellman?
Articulate maybe the monies that you're speaking of, if they aren't put into a reserve account, where do they go?
Sure. The money that's appropriated,
Yep.
the general fund money that is not spent, that is in the general fund departments, it just rolls into the cash balances that move forward. And as you know, those cash balances have built from a few $1 million a decade ago to an excess of $21 million when we started this year, and I expect it to be 21 to 23 million. So that money is just piling up, and looking at proper restricted uses for that for future expenses would be appropriate. Then you also have water fund monies. I think we determined in excess of $1 million that's been turned in on average regularly. That would revert back to the water fund, and my suggestion was, you're going to need equipment, and you're going to need plant and expenses, and to restrict off some of those monies. Again, since they're already spent, they're gone, they're off the books. And the same with sewer, same thing applies to sewer. So those would be the ones on the general fund side that also gives you some opportunity. You do have some funds that you subsidize regularly. You subsidize your airport, you subsidize your street department, swimming pool. We don't subsidize parking the last few years, but you could even consider that those subsidies is coming out of some of those carryovers. In other words, tell those organizations, hey, we're going to limit some of that subsidy to this carryover as you move forward, because those are very important operations. So you've got a lot of options. Happy to throw in my 2 cents at your committee for consideration. And
Mr. Palmer?
Thank you.
I request that Appropriations Committee have that conversation at a future meeting here in the next few weeks.
Mr. Webster?
As we talked about at the meeting, the Council of the Whole, this is a issue that probably needs to be taken care of sooner than later because of budgeting issues. So the administration can budget appropriately. So, Councilman Palmer, did you not just call your sidewalk meeting for the 18th?
The 18th at 5 o'clock.
So, that would have been the time when I would have asked to do that. I guess we can move back a day to the 17th. Mr. Auditor, are you available on the 17th? Monday the 17th. Rest of the Appropriations Committee, Monday the 17th at, I would say 5 p.m. I see no objections, so we'll call an Appropriations Committee for Monday, October 17th at 5 o'clock p.m. in the Mayor's Council Room on the Mayor's Conference Room on the 3rd floor.
Any other new business? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Baumann, second Mr. Greeno. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye. Any opposed, nay. We are adjourned. Adjournment.